Well, get ready for a fascinating 3 hours with scientist Dr. Brooks Agnew. We're going to be talking about remembering the future, the physics of the soul and time travel, weather manipulation, and what is going on. Get an update on the journey to the center of the planet. All that is next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back. Dr. Brooks Agnew, scientist, engineer, more than 25 years experience designing and improving manufacturing processes for numerous Fortune 500 companies. And I've spent most of his time hanging around Caltech as a youngster and the folks who co-opt at Jet Propulsion Labs, and he's currently the president and CEO of Vision Motor Cars, incorporating designing and manufacturing affordable electrical vehicles for highway use. A major program with Dr. Agnew tonight. We're going to be talking about HARP, weather control, a little bit of time travel, and, of course, what's going on. The journey to the center of the earth. Here, back again, is Dr. Brooks Agnew. Brooks, how are you?
I am doing so fine, George. Thank you so much for having me on the program.
Hey, tell me a little bit about the Vision Motor Cars. What are you doing there?
Well, in 2006, I pretty much retired from the automotive industry after a little more than 23 years in the business. I just kind of felt that major car makers were going in the wrong direction, and they're still running commercials with tires smoking, sideways drifting, 500 horsepower. Well, I don't think they get it. I mean, people don't want to break every traffic law ever written by the time they hit second gear. They want to be able to buy a house and put their kids through college, and they're tired of spending $500 a month on gasoline going to and from work. So we set about designing and manufacturing an affordable electric vehicle. And late last year, we finished the vehicle, we finished the prototypes, and this year we're going into manufacturing with it. So we're starting with a light pickup truck, which is very practical and useful for light delivery or people that commute or people that just like to drive a truck. So works out really well.
Fantastic. Let's get an update from you, Brooks, for a few minutes here on the plans to go into the center of the earth. You were thinking about a Russian ship. I'm not sure that worked out. Where do we stand on this?
Well, it's a long saga. As it turns out, these are Russian international waters, so we have to use a Russian ship. We tried using Norwegian ships and Canadian ships, and they just won't sail to the area that we want to go, so it's got to be the Russian ship. Now, that being said, the Russian shipping company is very excited about the expedition. They've supported it with a joint venture. We've got a 450-foot-long, 23,000-ton nuclear-powered icebreaker. It'll only carry 100 passengers, so we have to be very discriminating as to who we put on there to make sure we get a good, solid scientific staff. And we've got people from Stanford, and we've got papers from Washington University and Harvard and MIT, so we've got a very good, solid scientific base. And we're actually sailing to an area above the Arctic Circle that no one has ever been to by sea. Now, it's been flown over a few times, not the least of which is Admiral Byrd, but no one's ever been there by sea, just because these are Russian international waters and they don't go there. So we're not really going into the center of the earth, but there is an ancient legend that there is an opening into the earth up there. And we couldn't, of course, convince the Russians to sail their ship into it, but they'll get us close to the opening, if there is one, and we'll fly over it with a helicopter and photograph it. And the idea is that we will stream live from the ship during the entire cruise from at least 4 channels going 24 hours a day. So what we see, the people will see. Now, you asked what's the progress. Obviously, with only 100 berths, we can't take everybody on the planet. But everybody wants to go. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of people that have written this. So we realize that everyone's going to experience this through film, through some kind, either on a DVD in our theater or on some television special. So Hollywood had to get integrally involved. And so we began speaking to Hollywood talent about a year and a half ago, and we now finally have some personalities that are financially solid enough to be able to back this. And we've just now finished the screenplay. Yes, you have to write a screenplay for a documentary. I didn't know that. And that is going to the producer this next week. So we are making progress.
Well, you can right up to the point of going into the hole.
Yeah.
And then what, right?
Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, we there's a theory, not a theory, but there's a legend. And it goes way back. I mean, before Edmund Halley, who first wrote about it in the 1600s, that there may be an ancient civilization that got wiped off the surface, or at least had to retreat off the surface into the interior of the earth. We backed this up last fall when we went to Egypt. We followed up on again. I told you I was going to.
Yes.
And it turns out that there are records going all the way back to Abydos in Egypt that say that the ancient society that built those edifices retreated into the earth. Now, we don't know if that means caves or if they actually, were driven by some cataclysm to live off the surface. And after a couple of decades, it became impossible for them to return to the surface. But they're more ancient than any civilization that lives on the surface. And if that's true, then they may come out to see us. And when they do, we'll get it on film.
As you mentioned, Egypt, Zahi Hawass, who headed up their antiquities, was leaving his post, and I hear he's back in again, so he's going to stick around.
It's a difficult thing to leave for him. He has such a passionate desire to make sure that Egypt is remembered as the one who not only made these things anciently, although there's a lot of controversy about that. Even his own university in Cairo recently released a paper that said they're pretty convinced that these things are at least 13,000 years old and maybe older than that. Of course, that predates any before Egypt was even Egypt. So, and they're beginning to admit that maybe off-worlders help build these things because of the precision and the alignment with Sirius and Orion. These are not things that primitive people would have thought about. Not that people that could build an edifice like Cheops were primitive, but there you go. You have this this hold that Zahi Hawass has had on these antiquities for so long, and really, if it wasn't for him, the whole place would have been looted years ago. I mean, it's just unbelievable how much they've already lost to other nations who have come in and just taken stuff home with them.
Brooks, as people would go into the center, into the hole, I guess via the tip there from the ocean, the curvature is so ever so slight, you don't even know you're doing it, right?
Yeah, that's true. And that's how I actually got involved with the expedition way back in 2005. They had posted a question, how do we tell if we're sailing into an opening or not? And I tackled the question. I said, well, maybe we could use GPS. So we investigated that and found that, well, at above the 80th parallel, you can only see 3 satellites from sea level, and that's not enough to get an altitude precise enough. Now, it is if you're flying a plane at 40,000 feet, but not at sea level. So the next was to use sonar, bounce it off the bottom and see if the ocean gets shallower or something. But that wasn't sound, because what if the bottom was coming up towards you, the topology of the bottom of the sea? So we couldn't use an altimeter because sea level's pretty much always sea level. And so the idea was to build a precision gyroscope and actually map the curvature of the Earth. In other words, the rate at which it curves based on how far forward you sail. If we were sailing into an opening, then the radius would be noticeably smaller, and that gyroscope would begin over-rotating. At that point, we'd realize that we were sailing over the lip into something, and we would then start tacking back and forth to try to map the circumference of this opening. Some say it's several hundred miles across, and of course it is. You'd never be able to see it from sea level.
If it's there, Brooks, why is it such a secret? What is there that they're hiding?
I'm not really sure. In 2007, when the ice broke off, there was a very strange wind that blew, and conditions with warming and everything were just right. A huge continent-sized piece of ice broke off and opened what we call the Northwest Passage for the first time in, 100,000 years maybe. You could sail it. but nobody did. Nobody went there. There was no reason for anyone to sail. There was no commerce. So it really hasn't been sailed, at least from a civilian point of view. And I kind of say tongue-in-cheek, if the military would have sailed there, of course they would have shared all the information with us. But that's the only thing I can think of. We reviewed over 30,000 satellite photographs of this region, cloud cover, every single one of them. No clear view of the actual sea. So it's a mystery, and it's the ultimate myth to bust.
It sure is. Well, it's a dramatic story. Let's talk a little bit, just for a few minutes here, Brooks, before the break, and then we'll get into weather manipulation and some of the other things you're doing. Admiral Richard Byrd, when he apparently went into the center, went into the hole, he saw incredible things, didn't he?
Well, that's what's reported in a diary that has been circulated, and we've done as much investigation as probably anybody out there. And I just cannot be convinced that Admiral Byrd authored that diary. I know enough about his life, enough about his military history. He was a super patriot. He was dedicated to his country, and he would have given everything for it. And if he was ordered not to say anything about his flight over the North Pole in 1926 or over the South Pole in 1929, he would not have said anything to his dying day. But he did verbally discuss things with people. And those verbal discussions have grown over the years, over the last 75 years, into what we have today, this myth of his plane being seized by some tractor beam and pulled into the center of the earth, and then spending time with giant beings down there and learning that, we're ravaging the surface and all the things that people put behind that today. We just couldn't validate it, George. So we decided, and I'm a scientist, so I don't really believe in anything. I've got to have data. I've got to have proof, pictures, a nut, a bolt, a leaf, a bone, anything. I want something more than personal testimony. I want to witness it and let everybody see it at one time. And I think that'll be an earth-changing event, one way or the other.
I think so too, Brooks. I think so too. And how soon before you think you can wrap things up with the Hollywood folks?
It's working right now. I think they realize that 2012 is about the key window. Because the two ships that are the only two civilian ships on the planet capable of making this voyage for an extended period of time are going to be dry docked the following year. So 2012 is the final time this can ever be done.
And if I remember, it was at least $200,000 to get the ship going, wasn't it?
It was $2 million.
Oh, my gosh, it was off by a zero.
Yeah, those pesky zeros, they're... of course, hey, you're not the Fed. You could just add some if you were them. So
that's right, little fiat money. So what's new with you? What have you been working on?
Well, of course, the electric car company has been the top priority for the last couple of years. And, of course, we're privately held, and last year there were, about 12 electric car companies that were vying for various federal grants and programs that were advertised by the administration, none of which came to pass, I might add. They did for the major car makers, but not for the independents.
Well, Tesla got some money, right?
Yeah, Tesla got some loan guarantees, but they're pretty much in the same boat as everybody. And my hat's off to Elon. He's a household name in the electric car business. He's done a lot for the industry. His cars are awesome. They do a wonderful job. They're in a great niche.
Did he go down personally, financially? I heard rumors that he went bankrupt or something.
Well, I don't know anything about his personal financial situation. I do know that he and his top executives have all put money in the company. They're dedicated to the company. They work there every day. They are totally committed to getting this sedan up and running, and they're making great progress. And I've got to tell you, coming from the automotive industry, he came from a different industry, and some of his executives come from the financial industry. But in the automotive business, to launch a vehicle is about a 5-year-long supertanker. Once you set the course, you better stay on course. There's no turning left or turning right. And there's a little bit of agility to being small and